Please welcome Tarana Burke and Lydia Polgreen.
Oh, it's a little baby chair.
Yeah, they didn't design these chairs with us in mind.
Yeah, this chair's not made for
Yeah.
me.
When you say all of us,
Exactly.
I mean all of
That's
us,
the include.
right?
I need an ample booty chair.
An ample booty chair. I'll talk to Dylan. We work together. So last year, now you need no introduction. We've just seen the amazing video. I really want to reflect on what this last year has been like for you. And last year you gave a TED Talk. And in that TED Talk, you said something that surprised me as someone who, you know, is at the forefront of a movement that like literally went viral and is changing the world. And you said, "I'm numb." And it got me thinking about this extraordinary time we're living in, right? Where we're seeing so much accountability and yet so much lack of accountability. So where are we right now with the Me Too movement?
Well, it depends on who you ask sometimes. And it depends on the day. I think we're at a good place, but we're still very, very early. And for those of us who have been in this work, and there's so many people who have been doing this work for so many years, I think we all feel excited, but we're really clear that there's such a long way to go. And I think you have to pair that with people who haven't been doing this work, who this moment feels big for everybody, but it feels so large to even be able to say these things out of their mouth. And so some folks feel like, well, we've arrived. Look at us. We can say Me Too now, and people lose their jobs, and people have to, you know, answer for their thing. But that's not the movement. You know, I always say that the hashtag is not a movement. It is a wonderful galvanizing tool to help us build the movement. But hashtags don't heal. And our work is really around, in two different ways, figuring out what people need to heal and activating those people while they're healing to do this work. None of that is gonna come from us just like naming and shaming or using social media. Like we have to have like, you know, feet to the street.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it just feels like we're on this giant seesaw. You know, we had an extraordinary year in 2017, 2018, we see the Kavanaugh hearings, we see Christine. So how do you keep your spirits up? How do you keep going?
I mean, the reason why, let me tell you, that TED Talk came, probably shouldn't say this, but it definitely came in the 11th hour. Because I kept trying to figure out this, you know, it's a TED Talk, right? You want to say this profound thing. I want to like change people's lives, whatever. And you know, it felt like a big moment, but truth is important to me.
Yeah.
And there was a woman, well, a couple of women who worked for TED who kept saying, you know, it's okay to be honest, it's okay to be honest. And I was like, really? Because in that moment, particularly coming off of Kavanaugh, that's really where that came from. There was so much momentum all year, and everywhere we go, everybody's excited, and we're like, we're gonna change the world, we're doing it, we're doing it. And then that happened, and I got a new sense of reality of where we were. It grounded me in a whole new way. And so what I realized coming off of the hearings was that, oh goodness, people are excited about what's happening, but they don't really understand what survival looks like. Right? People don't understand the lived experiences of survivors, or else you would not be judging this woman in this moment in this way.
Yeah.
So, wait, what was your question?
No, you answered my question.
Oh, I forgot.
But I mean, just to pick up on that point, I mean, I feel like there was this enormous backlash during the Kavanaugh hearings where it's like, that could be my son, that could be my brother. Well, what about Christine Blasey Ford?
About your daughter.
That could be your daughter. It could be your sister. I mean, how do you change that discourse?
You know, I have a friend who always says patriarchy is a motherfucker. Oh, can we curse?
Yes.
Sorry in advance.
No.
But really, it's so interesting to see both women and men picked up that narrative, right? It was And I see the backlash, and it wasn't just Kavanaugh. I see it around R. Kelly, I see it around Bill Cosby, I see it around even Weinstein. There's this little layer of like, but what about these poor men? You know? And the backlash has been hard. It really is. I do think that when you are in movement spaces, we kind of live in a bubble. And so like on your Facebook feeds and your Twitter feeds, you kind of have all these like-minded people. If I don't agree with this, most of my friends don't agree with it. Being thrust into a world where people are, somebody asked me in an interview yesterday, what about the people who don't agree with Me Too? And I was like, what is there not to agree with? Right? We're not asking for weird things. It's like, if you want to touch me, can you please ask permission? It's not.
Sounds reasonable to me.
Quite reasonable.
No, I absolutely agree. You touched on this earlier, and I just want to come back to it. I mean, let's talk about bringing the movement back to survivors and really focusing on survivors. They're, being hailed as heroes, in many places. We are so grateful to them. But are we doing enough to protect and support survivors?
No, we're not, and it's not enough. And I say this all the time. It's not enough to elevate. People call me courageous all the time, and they're like, "You're so courageous." I'm like, one, this is not really courage. I mean, it's. I don't want to sound, however that may sound, but I'm not being flippant. But I feel dutiful, right? I have a duty to these people. We wouldn't have a Me Too. Take the work I did off the table for a second. Me Too went viral because literal people sat down in front of their computers and got the courage up to say these two words or to tell their story and to share it in a way that you can't retract. And if that hadn't have happened, there would be no viralness, right? The women in Hollywood who came forward made the story big, and it made people pay attention. The people, the 12 million people who hashtagged in 24 hours, that was courageous. And we are literally living off their labor right now without paying them. That's what's happening. We're trading on the labor of survivors. It's nice to be like, look at these courageous people, but like, I always think of it like this, like millions of people raised their hand last year to say Me Too, and their hands are still raised. Because we skip over them and we look past them and say, oh my gosh, Me Too went viral, this is a phenomenon. But how will these men get their jobs back? What's the road to redemption? Is there a way? Or look at the people that Me Too have been taken down. These conversations are the wrong conversations. So we have to do more for, this is the thing I think, and you're a journalist, so you know this. I think, I'm curious for journalists. I'm always like, aren't you bored telling the same story? They've been telling the same story for a year and a half. So the people who said Me Too, some were talking about sexual harassment in the workplace, some were talking about child sexual abuse. There are layers and layers of things that happen when you open up this can of worms around sexual violence. Tell different stories. Yeah. And we need those stories to be told so people can understand that my experience with sexual violence is different from yours. We're connected by the trauma, but we need different responses. And we have like a unified response.
Amen. I mean, our theme this year at Makers is all of us. And, Me Too started in 2006 when, you were really focused on young women and girls in communities of color and underprivileged communities. Come to see it 12 years later go viral when it's about movie stars and movie producers. How do you keep the movement grounded in that kind of original intent of taking care of the most vulnerable and making sure that they're at the center of your activism?
So, I mean, it's not hard for me as a person, right? I honestly, every time I show up somewhere, I'm surprised that they keep giving me microphones because I keep being like, Black people, queer people, trans people, disabled people, and they like, bring her back. So, but that's not hard for me. What is hard is that I have now become sort of this representative of this movement and of this work, and I can't be the only voice saying it. I can't be like, oh, we need somebody to talk about, let's bring Tarana in. Other people have to say it. I think, folks try to like blame the actresses in Hollywood for co-op. That didn't happen. Like, those women are courageous. They came forward and told their stories and told their truth, not to like take something from some Black woman from the Bronx. We kind of just sort of, is coalesce the right word?
Yeah.
came together like this. But what has to happen, though, and I think the best examples of centering has happened when they pass microphones and when they amplify and when people keep bringing it back to survivors. So that means in your everyday lives, when you're having these conversations and people say things like, you know, Me Too is just trying to take down powerful men, or, oh, they're trying to undo due process. We have to have language, and the language is, no, it's not. Me Too is about making sure survivors have the resources they need to heal and that they're at the forefront of doing the work to end sexual violence, period. And as long as we keep doing that, we can keep centering.
We got a lot of allies in this room and people who can encourage other people to be allies. Let's give folks a call to action. What can we all be doing in our lives to further adjust more equitable world in which survivors are safe and their stories are heard?
Oh, you want to know what to do? Okay.
Yes.
So, one, I think what I just said is a start, right? We have to talk about Me Too differently. The PSA that we saw, that the Terry Crews PSA, is one of 4 that we just released. They're beautiful, you should go look at them, they're amazing. The reason why we did that is so that people, coming off of Kavanaugh and that kind of thing, I realized people didn't know how to talk about this. They didn't know, it's still very uncomfortable. So I think one of the things we have to do is get comfortable with that discomfort and have some really hard conversations in our everyday lives. I'm not calling for people to go and be on the front lines. There's tons of us doing that work. You don't have to like commit your life to this. But in the ways that it comes up, it inevitably comes up. You need to talk about this movement differently. You need to redirect the men and women in your life or the people in your life who characterize it as whatever they do that's negative. That's one thing. We also need to be proactive in our lives. So if you're at a job and you, like, I can't see you, so I would have you raise your hand, but I always ask people, like, do you know the sexual harassment policy at your job? Like, you know one exists because they have to have it legally, but go, print it out, get 2 or 3 people over some coffee and read it. And make sure that it matches your lived experience in that place, right? Look for the gaps. We only have a minute, so I can say this kind of like in a, shortly.
I don't think anybody's gonna chase you off stage,
But this is the thing. There's mostly women here. And Me Too is not a woman's movement. We are a survivors movement. I'm really clear about that. But so many women are affected by sexual violence. And so many of us have had experiences where we didn't have the resources we needed, we didn't have access to things we needed, or you've heard those stories. Those are the gaps. You can figure out how to fill in those gaps in your community, in your school, in your home, in your church. The thing is, don't look away. If you want to be proactive, don't look away. It's not enough to celebrate me as an individual and be like, oh, I love her, she's amazing, if you are not going to stand up for what I believe in. I love y'all are wonderful, but this doesn't serve me, right? Like getting on a nice dress and sitting on the stage is not necessarily the work unless when you leave here, you take something I said into your life to make some change about that. That's what has to happen.
Well, straight from the Bronx to the cover of Time magazine, Tarana Burke, thank you for the inspiration.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.